Hi, my name is Bella Crozier, and I am the Youth Opioid Awareness Campaign Coordinator here at Sudbury Rainbow Crime Stoppers. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about the opioid crisis and how it is affecting the youth in our community. Did you know that prescription opioids are now one of the most misused substances among Ontario youth? Youth play a significant and often overlooked role in Canada's increasing opioid crisis. In the 2015 Ontario Student Drug Use and Health Survey, an estimated 10% of students in grades 7 to 12 used opioid pain relievers without a prescription. That's almost 95,000 youth in Ontario alone. You may be wondering, what exactly are opioids? Well, opioids are a group of highly addictive drugs whose primary use is to alleviate pain. The term opioid is used to describe the compounds that target the opioid receptors. You may have also heard them being called narcotics. However, the word narcotic is used to describe drugs that are abused as a whole, which opioids often are. Opioids originated naturally from plants. They are made from opium, which is found in the seed pod of the opioid poppy, as seen in the picture here. Opioids can be obtained in two ways. One, as a prescription medication, or two, illegally as a street drug. There are many different kinds of opioids in existence. They can be categorized into three main categories: natural, semi-synthetic, and synthetic. Natural opioids include drugs that are directly extracted from the chemicals in the pods of the opium poppy. Semi-synthetic opioids contain drugs that are made from natural opioids, modifying it slightly and making it into a new drug. Synthetic opioids include drugs that are made in a pharmaceutical laboratory to imitate the effects of natural opioids. How does the chemistry of opioids work? The chemical makeup of opioids is pretty straightforward. They are generally composed of four basic elements: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. I mentioned earlier that there are many types of opioids. Their simplicity explains why they are abundant and opioid analogs can be easily made. Opioid analogs are variations of other opioids made by making slight changes to the drug's chemical formula. For example, fentanyl has a very dangerous similar drug known as carfentanil. How strong are opioids? Each opioid has a different potency as seen above. Morphine is the weakest opioid and is generally administered in hospitals to treat moderate to severe pain. Oxycodone is 1.5 times stronger than morphine. Heroin is 2 to 5 times stronger than morphine. Fentanyl is 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine, and carfentanil is 10,000 times stronger than morphine. This picture shows the amount of different drugs needed to kill an average adult. Imagine just how little would be able to kill a younger person. Carfentanil is the strongest opioid. As I mentioned a couple slides ago, it is 10,000 times more powerful than morphine. Carfentanil was even mentioned in the Jurassic Park and Jurassic World series. In the movies, carfentanil is used to tranquilize and sedate the largest dinosaurs. Carfentanil is also known as the elephant tranquilizer, as only 13 milligrams can sedate an adult elephant, so only a fraction more than that can take down a fully grown elephant. What's so dangerous with extremely potent drugs such as carfentanil and fentanyl is that many street drugs like heroin are cut with them. This is because a smaller amount will result in a powerful high, and it is cheaper than pure heroin. Many street dealers will lace drugs with them, and it is impossible to tell the difference between a clean batch and one that could be fatal. Now, let's talk about how opioid addiction works exactly.
This is Susan. Susan loves to bike. While out for a ride, she falls and breaks her arm. Special cells called neurons send a signal through the spinal cord to the brain, which interprets the signal as pain. Susan understands the pain means she needs to go to the hospital, and her body is equipped for survival, helping her not to panic so she can seek help. Many of her neurons are covered in proteins called opioid receptors. These receptors act like a brake to slow down the neuron's ability to send pain signals. When injured, her body releases natural painkillers called endorphins. Like a key in a lock, endorphins activate opioid receptors, slowing down the pain signal and preventing a panic. Susan gets treated for the broken bone, but 3 months later, her arm still hurts. And now that pain is making her feel depressed and anxious. So her doctor prescribes an opioid painkiller. There are many different opioids, but they all share a chemical similarity to our own endorphins. This allows them to bind to the same opioid receptors and stop pain signals. But that's not all they do. Deep inside Susan's brain is a region called the ventral tegmental area, or VTA for short. The VTA is full of neurons that produce a chemical called dopamine. When something good happens, dopamine is released, giving Susan a feeling of pleasure. This helps teach her brain to keep seeking out good things. To keep dopamine neurons in check, inhibitory neurons keep the brakes on until something good comes along. Just like the pain neuron, these neurons are covered in opioid receptors. When Susan takes the painkiller prescribed by her doctor, the opioid receptors turn off the inhibitory neurons and release the brake on the dopamine neurons. The rush of dopamine temporarily eliminates Susan's depression and anxiety, and she feels relief, calmness, and even euphoria.
So, opioids work by attaching to receptors in the nervous system, essentially blocking pain messages sent from the body, thus alleviating pain. They also create a feeling of euphoria, or a high, which contributes to their addictive properties. So now you are addicted. What happens next? Well, long-term effects will eventually kick in. Since opioids are so addictive, the biggest long-term effects of opioid use are dependence and substance use disorder. Abusing opioids for a long period of time will also lead to increased tolerance, meaning that users will require a stronger dose to achieve the same high. Opioid addiction can impact many aspects of your life. Let's see what this looks like. There could be effects on the relationships with people that surround you. A person with opioid addiction may experience changes in behavior affecting their relationships with people around them. Typical behavior changes include withdrawing from social events and drastic changes in personality. There can also be numerous effects on society, such as financial and resource burdens. The effects on the healthcare system and the judicial system are the most significant. It is not uncommon to see opioid users resorting to small crimes such as theft to support their addictions, thus increasing the burden on the judicial system. The fentanyl crisis also has a huge impact on society. Many street drugs such as heroin are cut with fentanyl, and clients who are unaware of this often overdose. Fentanyl is so powerful that as little as 2 milligrams can be lethal. The picture on the left shows a 1.5-year difference of an opioid user. She was arrested for the possession of 2 different kinds of opioids, among other drug-related charges. The picture on the right shows a 3-year difference between a known heroin user. In both pictures, he was charged for the possession of heroin, among other drug-related charges. Opioid withdrawal occurs when someone who is dependent on opioids suddenly decreases or stops taking opioids. Withdrawal can occur when someone is overdosing and they are given naloxone. We will discuss more about this later. Withdrawal is equated to having a very severe flu. The symptoms often leave people incapacitated for many days, disrupting their daily life. People who are dependent on opioids are able to function while they still feel the effects of the drug. But when withdrawal sets in, their bodies need time to adjust. This is another reason why users are not able to quit easily. Many people cannot afford to stop working for this period of time. When you are experiencing an overdose, there will be immediate and later symptoms. Immediate opioid withdrawal symptoms include anxiety, cravings for the drug, and increased respiration. This is usually accompanied with flu-like symptoms such as sweating, yawning, runny nose, crying, pupil dilation, and stomach cramps. Later physical symptoms include goosebumps, tremors, muscle twitching, severe heart rate, hypertension, fever and chills, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Physical symptoms may be seen as early as 4 hours after the last dose, then peak within 48 to 72 hours and subside after about a week. While the physical symptoms will stop, the emotional and psychological effects will linger. Cravings and depression are also common and may lead to a relapse. How do people become addicted to opioids? Opioid addiction can happen to anyone. It can happen to you, to your parents, to your friends. Anyone is susceptible to addiction. There are a few factors that can influence whether someone may be more inclined to becoming addicted. This includes your biology, environment, and development. A person's biology can influence their susceptibility to becoming addicted to opioids. Your genes, ethnicity, and mental disorders can influence drug use as well. Also, your gender can make you predisposed, as men are more likely than women to experience substance use disorder. Some influencing environmental factors include family, friends, socioeconomic status, peer pressure, abuse, early exposure to drugs, and stress. Genetic and environmental factors combined during a child's critical development stages can greatly influence addiction. The earlier the drug exposure is, especially in teens and children, the greater the risk of addiction. This is because when you're young, your brain is not fully formed, which impairs judgment, leading to bad decisions being made. As I mentioned before, opioids have been around for thousands of years. Where they came from and their history and origin plays an important role in showing us just how we've gotten into the crisis we're in today. Let's look at a brief timeline of the history of opioids. The first mention of opioids was 5,000 years ago. It can be traced back to Mesopotamia, located in Western Asia. The ancient Sumerians from the region referred to the opium poppy as the joy plant. In the 17th and 18th centuries, laudanum, a mix of opium and alcohol, was used to treat various ailments. In 1804, morphine was isolated by a German chemist named Friedrich Saturner. Several years later, in 1874, heroin was derived from morphine. After its discovery, its main use became to treat pain. In 1908, Canada became one of the first countries to ban opium for recreational and non-medicinal use. The Opium Act of 1908 made it an offense to import, manufacture, possess, or sell opium for any non-medical reasons. In the 1950s, synthetic opioids such as oxycodone were created. Fentanyl was then created in 1960, and shortly after, in 1974, the potent carfentanil was created. In the 1980s, medical professionals began using opioids to treat cases of chronic pain. In the 1990s, slow-release opioids entered the scene. These opioids were supposed to offer pain treatment options said to be safer. 1996 is a year in which many consider to be the start of the opioid crisis. Private pharmaceutical companies began to mass market and promote their new opioid pharmaceuticals. The most well-known case is that of Purdue Pharma and their supposedly safe OxyContin. The company marketed it to people as a non-addictive option and greatly downplayed the dangers of this opioid. After years of deception and tremendous loss due to addiction, Purdue Pharma was charged. In 2007, they were found guilty of misleading healthcare workers and the public about the dangers and addictive properties of OxyContin. Today, the opioid crisis is considered an epidemic. This term refers to the thousands of opioid-related deaths that have occurred in recent years. And the death toll is not slowing down. You might think that this is a problem only affecting major cities. However, this is not the case. In fact, right here in Northern Ontario, we have twice as many weekly opioid deaths as Southern Ontario. On top of this, Sudbury's opioid problem is especially bad. Currently, our opioid mortality rate is about 3 times higher than the national average. You might recognize this picture above as it was taken right here in downtown Sudbury. This memorial site is lined with white crosses placed there to honor those who have lost their battle with addiction. It was first initiated by Denise Sandel, whose son, Miles Keeney, passed away in that very location from a suspected overdose. In an effort to draw attention to the opioid crisis, Sandel placed a cross to commemorate her son, and soon many others approached her to have a cross placed there for their loved ones as well. As more and more people were added, the crosses were moved to the corner of Brady Street and Paris Street. There are now over 100 crosses, with more being added periodically, demonstrating how bad the crisis has become in our local town. Now, let's talk about some ways to seek treatment for opioid addiction. Opioid addiction treatment typically involves opioid agonists such as buprenorphine and methadone. When taken at the correct dose, they prevent withdrawal symptoms and reduce drug cravings without causing feelings of euphoria or tiredness. Methadone and buprenorphine are long-acting opioid drugs used to replace the shorter-acting opioids like heroin, oxycodone, fentanyl, etc. that someone may be addicted to. The effects of long-acting drugs avoid the feelings of withdrawal for 24 to 36 hours as compared to the short-acting drugs, which last about 6 to 8 hours. The idea is to take less and less, eventually curbing the addiction. These treatment options also help people who are addicted get their lives in order. Methadone is usually taken as a drink, whereas buprenorphine is a pill that is absorbed under the tongue. Since they are opioids, there is still a risk of overdose. However, methadone has a higher risk of overdose than buprenorphine. Essentially, to treat opioid addiction, you need to take more opioids, which just shows you another reason why opioids are a vicious cycle you don't want to get into. Harm reduction is an approach to reduce the health and social harms associated with addiction and substance use, without necessarily requiring people who use substances to abstain or stop. Examples of harm reduction are using substances in a safe environment with people around and having needle exchange programs for people who inject drugs. Now that we've covered all of the basics about opioids, let's discuss your role. Let's say you find your friend and you think they might be experiencing an overdose. What can you do? It is very important to know the facts of opioid overdose. When someone has an opioid overdose, their breathing gets suppressed and oxygen is unable to reach vital organs, resulting in the body beginning to shut down. It is critical that you act quickly if you think your friend is experiencing an overdose. Keep in mind that after substance use, the impact of an overdose could happen in as little as 20 minutes and up to as long as 2 hours afterwards. Signs to look for include blue lips or nails, dizziness or confusion, choking, gurgling, or snoring sounds, slow, weak, or no breathing, drowsiness or difficulty staying awake, and if they can't be woken up. All right, you've just identified that your friend is experiencing an opioid overdose. What do you do now? Call 911 and request an ambulance. As calmly as possible, tell them what is going on, where you are, and who you are with. The operator will tell you what you should do next. The 911 operator should ask you if you have access to a Narcan kit, and that if you do, you should administer it immediately. So, you look through your friend's bag and find one. Naloxone, also known by its trade name Narcan, is a fast-acting drug that can be administered to temporarily reverse the effects of opioid overdose. Narcan is available at any pharmacy and you can get one anonymously, free of charge. There are 2 kinds of Narcan kits available for home use in Canada. The naloxone injection is injected into any muscle in the body, like the arm or thigh. It will take effect in 3 to 5 minutes. The naloxone nasal spray, which is sprayed into the nose to be absorbed, will take effect after 2 to 3 minutes. Let's watch this short video on how to give the naloxone nasal spray. This video shows you how to give the naloxone injection. Let's say you and your friend did the drugs together. Remember, the same amount of an opioid may influence people differently, so in this case, your friend is overdosing. You want to save your friend, but you don't want to get in trouble for using. What a difficult decision. The Good Samaritan law is in place for this reason, to save lives. The Good Samaritan Drug Overdose Act gives some legal protection for individuals who seek emergency help during an overdose. If you suspect someone is overdosing, call 911 immediately and administer naloxone if available. Stay with the person until help arrives. The law does provide protection against charges for possessing drugs for your own use, violating conditions of your parole, bail, probation, or conditional sentence for a simple drug possession charge. Let's say you found out that your friend has been selling some type of opioid to a lot of people. This is drug trafficking and it is highly illegal. It is also very dangerous and can possibly lead to the deaths of many people. What can you do? Call the police to report it and risk having to testify against your friend in court? Or call Crime Stoppers. By submitting a tip to Crime Stoppers, you remain 100% anonymous, meaning that you never need to testify and could be eligible for up to a $2,000 reward if your tip results in a resolution. Crime Stoppers is based on the simple principle that for every crime committed, someone other than the criminal has information that would help solve the crime and encourages members of the community to provide anonymous information to assist law enforcement agencies in the fight against crime. You can submit a 100% anonymous tip to Crime Stoppers in 3 ways. You can call these numbers to speak directly with a coordinator who will take your tip, or visit our online website at this link and click the Submit a Tip button shown here. You can also submit a tip on Facebook by using the Submit a Tip tab. If you select this option, please ensure you are using the tab and please do not send us a direct message. I want to end this presentation with some hotlines you can call if you need help with problematic substance use. All of these hotlines are available 24 hours a day, and they are there for you to call if you are battling addiction or you know someone battling addiction. Thank you for listening and participating in this presentation about opioids. With the increasing crisis happening all over the world, Crime Stoppers would like to help in any way we can. We hope there is something you can take away from this to help curb the opioid epidemic.